When it comes to the value of sports cards, I've come to realize that logic is very often not part of the equation. In this video, we're going to consider why it's important to understand this if you're trying to figure out how to make some profit with sports cards. Let's get into this. There's all kinds of spaces where sports card values are illogical. Let's consider a few. Number one, ultra-modern, unproven rookie cards being more valuable than well-established superstars. It is not uncommon at all where value is determined more by untapped potential than it is by actual proven skill. Every year, a new crop of rookies comes into the league, and many of them will have cards that skyrocket in value over players who are well established, players that you'd want to build an entire team around. When a Jonathan Kuminga Court Kings Rookies 4 can sell for higher than a Jason Tatum Court Kings Rookies 4, you know there's some logic lacking in the market. The Kuminga card very likely has a much higher print run, and the chances of Kuminga ever becoming as good as Tatum are extremely slim. Yet due to this untapped potential, his cards reach a point that wouldn't even be able to be maintained even if he did unexpectedly become as good as Tatum. That's just really illogical. Number two, less iconic sets that are shorter printed, higher priced as wax, higher quality, and nicer looking often have less value than the one or two sets that get deemed as the flagship sets. In basketball cards, some of my favorite looking modern card brands are Origin, Spectra, Crown Royale, Court Kings. They're expensive to buy in wax form, and they only have a few cards per box, so the best cards from within those sets are really very rare on the market. They have a nice artistic aesthetic to them for the most part. I mean, Crown Royale and Court Kings can honestly sometimes go a little bit overboard, but Origins in particular, I think just looks amazing. In general, to my logical mind, they just seem like something that should be a slight tier above, say, Prism or Select or Optic. But when it comes to card values in basketball, Select and especially Prism tend to always be considered more highly than them, and their value for singles very often end up reflecting this market preference. The same sort of thing can be seen when looking at cards from earlier years. The Topps Chrome Kobe rookie outshines any other base rookie out there in value, despite the fact that there were some other really great brands of cards making Kobe rookies. Fleer Metal and Topps Finest to name a couple of my favorites. But for whatever reason, Topps Chrome remains the iconic one. To me, it's illogical. Topps Finest was even more premium, it looked even nicer, it had a shorter print run, and yet it's not as valuable as the Topps Chrome. These are just a couple of examples, but if you analyze the sports card market data more and more over time, you can keep finding more and more examples of things where the value of cards seem illogical in comparison to each other. I've also highlighted a handful of these in some of my previous videos as well, when looking at things like, for example, why the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle is so much more valuable than the 1951 Bowman, despite 1951 being his actual rookie season, and the two cards actually don't have that crazy a different a print run. Even the simple fact that Mickey Mantle cards tower above some of the values of some of his contemporaries lacks a lot of logic in my mind. Even just considering baseball players that were playing at the same time as Mickey, there's a number of them who are widely considered better baseball players than Mantle by baseball historians. Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, Ted Williams are all often considered better. No doubt Mantle was great, but he wasn't like Jordan was to the basketball in the 90s. He wasn't the far and away best player of his era, but his card values certainly would make you think so. Seems a little illogical to me. I know there's other reasons behind it, but it's lacking a certain logic. Another one I've talked about in a previous video is the iconic Michael Jordan Scoring Kings card. As amazing as that card is, and I too really love it and would love to have one myself someday, its value flies way higher over quite a number of other Jordan cards from the same time period that also look really cool and that also had somewhat similar pack odds. The math of the whole thing doesn't add up to make logical sense. Now, in all of the cases I've talked about so far, and I would suggest in pretty much every other example you'd be likely to find, the thing that seems to cause this illogic is the power of narrative. Now, what do I mean by narrative? Basically, I mean the things that get talked about by the sports card community when a certain card is discussed. Prism is talked about as the flagship of modern basketball card brands. The potential of new and upcoming rookies is high on the topics of discussion. The Kobe Topps Chrome rookie is talked about with an air of awe. The 1952 Topps Mantle is considered the grail in conversations, while the 1951 Bowman is largely not discussed or more niche discussed. Mantle is talked about with goggles that see him as more than he was. The Scoring Kings Michael Jordan card is discussed as being like the pinnacle of 1990s inserts. In all of these cases and in many others, the values of the cards are determined much more by the direction of the discussion surrounding them than they are about the data or about the numbers behind things. This is one of the reasons why I think you have to be a little bit careful when using some of these modern day data tools when you're making decisions with sports cards. Yes, the data tools are giving you some data. Some of it is correct. Some of it is also including manipulated data like shield auctions and card sales that never completely finished. That's very well documented as well. But even if the data had no manipulated numbers inside of it at all, even then there is still a limitation to how useful some of that data can be. The data cannot tell you where the narrative is going or coming from. The data can give you a snapshot of things, but it cannot give you the whole movie. Narrative is the director of the movie, and the data tools are just the screenshot of a moment in that movie. If you don't understand the narrative, if you don't understand the forces that brought things to that snapshot data moment, or the narratives that are likely to affect things moving forward, then that snapshot of data has really limited value. You have to understand the whole movie to be able to get some value from that snapshot. I think it's important for anyone who's using that data to understand it within this kind of context. If you don't, it's too easy to see the tree but completely miss out on the forest. And that's not a recipe for making good decisions in the sports card market.